Well, President Trump and the Japanese Prime Minister, they spoke earlier today about the escalating North Korea nuclear threat, as UN Ambassador Nikki Haley says she's done talking about the rogue regime. So how should the U.S. deal with Kim Jong-un? Joining us now, Gordon Chang, author of Nuclear Showdown, North Korea Takes on the World, as well as Paul Bonicelli, a former foreign policy advisor to President George W. Bush. Good to see both of you. We're going to begin with you, Paul. Is there still a window of opportunity for sanctions to actually make a difference here? Paul?
Probably not, but I think the president's going to try them. I think the president will try them. I think that he will give it that last shot. But at the same time, unlike our previous presidents, he's going to be very forceful militarily. He's going to do shows of force like we just saw yesterday. This is three administrations have had to deal with this, and President Trump is left with it. When I worked on Capitol Hill and then in the administration, we never did enough to hurt North Korea and China and its enablers with sanctions, and we never frightened them enough with what we were willing to do, and I think that's changing now under this president.
Gordon, so how do you get China on board here to do more? You know, President Trump spoke with the Japanese Prime Minister earlier today, and they agreed it's not just up to the United States and South Korea to put pressure on North Korea, but also China. How do you make that happen?
I think a couple things. So first of all, we need to start unplugging larger Chinese banks from the global financial system. We started that on June 29th with Bank of Dandong, but that's a small institution. But we know that the larger Chinese banks have also been laundering money for the North Koreans. But, you know, more important, I think President Trump needs to say to the Chinese, look, you can support the North Koreans or you can do business with the United States, but you can't do both. And if the Chinese think that he is serious, then we are a long way towards a solution. I think the sanctions have to be severe because, as Paul said, we don't have very much time, but sanctions can work if we have the political will to impose the severest of them.
I want to also ask you, Paul, about Russia. The U.S. just approved sanctions on that country. Do you think Putin will try to use this as a bargaining chip, you know, remove or lessen the sanctions, and we're going to do more to help you with North Korea? Can you see that playing out, Paul?
I can see that playing out in this sense. Putin is desperate. The Magnitsky Act, you know, what he's complaining about is hurting his own pocketbook and his own ability to stay in control. So always shows of force from regimes like the Chinese, from the Russians. But behind the scenes, they are desperate for Donald Trump's administration to find a way to help them back down. I don't think we're going to see that in the next month or two. But in the next 6 months to a year, you're going to see that kind of thing work out, and I believe the Trump administration will be smart enough to get that, particularly with someone like General Kelly in charge now as Chief of Staff.
Right, and this is General Kelly's first day on the job as Chief of Staff. Gordon, how do you expect him to respond to the latest provocations from North Korea? I mean, this missile could actually hit Chicago. That's the mainland United States.
Yes, and there's also a suggestion that missile, the Hwasong-14, can also hit Boston and New York. And if they can't do it this week, they'll be able to do it a couple months down the road, because they have even longer range missiles that they haven't tested. You know, I don't know how much policy making John Kelly will be doing, but, you know, we have seen the policy makers in the Trump administration, including the president himself, you know, express this frustration, with Nikki Haley saying, look, we're not even calling a Security Council meeting because that's worthless. So that's a good step, and I think it's a step that we're going to have to pursue again in the future. No diplomacy, a lot of pressure.
So, Paul, as Nikki Haley said, the time for talk is over. What is the next step for the administration in confronting North Korea?
Well, one thing that you do is say the time for talking is over, but you're still willing to talk behind the scenes, and I think that's what this administration is trying to do, get the attention of rogue states that we're not interested in a war, but we will have one if we have to. Now let's get serious about fixing these problems, and as Gordon said, with the Chinese, with the Russians as well. That kind of stuff can happen in the background, but you have to show the forcefulness first. You have to show that we are serious, and it is unlike the previous three administrations. We will not tolerate it.
And Gordon, this is an issue that many Americans, many people around the world are very concerned about.
Yeah.
Something escalating, a crisis really escalating with North Korea.
Yes, and it would be horrific because we know that the casualties in the first hours of a conflict on the Korean Peninsula could number in the hundreds of thousands. We're talking perhaps the world's first nuclear exchange, and China might even be on the other side of that exchange. So the Trump administration has a moral obligation, not just to the American people and people in the region, but to everybody to try to do everything possible short of the use of force. You know, eventually there will be diplomacy, but it should be at the end when the North Koreans know that they have to give up their weapons. We have the elements of national power to do this. We just need the political will, and I hope Trump has it.
I do too. Gordon, Paul, thank you for joining us and for your time this morning.